Alright people, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell notification. That way you'll know when I upload the next video and you'll be supporting my channel. Follow me on Twitter. Every time I upload a new video, I'll be tweeting. Origin UX, and this is the Bronze Age Collapse. Systems Collapse, Accessory Part 4 by the channel Extra Credits. Yeah, Bronze Age Collapse has been a pretty interesting topic so far. This is one of the historical events that I've never come across ever for all the historical videos I've seen in the past 2 years. Basically, 4 major civilizations disappear relatively around the same time. Considering the time scale, it was relatively around the same time. And amongst them, obviously, there are so many theories, right? I like the theory of a natural disaster, where something happened, right? Natural disaster happened, and because of that natural disaster, it took time, right? Before the disaster could have, I guess, gone. And during that time, economy would have fallen at the place that it couldn't pick up again. And I guess slowly civilization degraded away, and people moved away, migrated somewhere else. I mean, it could be that. And other thing could be sea people. Now maybe these are some different type of people which we just consider sea people as one, but maybe they were completely different, attacked at the coincidentally around the same time to this different civilization. Or it could be the different people united under one person, one guy, or one empire who basically attacked all the civilization. It could be anything, but knowing how the Bronze Age civilization was hanging together with the thread of the trading economy they had, like everybody had to trade just to survive. That was a pretty fragile thing, and at the time the wars, the famines, the natural disaster, anything could have taken that out. So it's not far-fetched to think how this could have gone, but since we don't have an actual hard data on what really happened, I guess it's all speculation in the end. But it's that for that reason it makes it really fun, because we really don't know what happened. We can just speculate here. Remember, if you like my reaction, don't forget to subscribe. Check out the reaction. There's a link in the description. Check out the cards for placing cards. And yeah, follow me on Twitter. I'll be tweeting every time I upload a new reaction video on there. So that way you can stay up to date to all my reaction videos. And yeah, let's watch this one.
At last, we have all the pieces. Now it's time to put together the puzzle of how the Bronze Age collapses. In this episode, we're going to do something that we generally try to avoid here. We are going to speculate. There's just no conclusive historical data on this, or even general consensus among scholars. So today, we are going to present to you the line of reasoning that made the most sense to us, and share with you one of the most interesting theories about societal collapse that we found along the way. So, here's how we see it. Everything starts with food shortages. At first, these shortages are probably happening outside what we think of as the Bronze Age world. They're probably in Europe, or maybe the Eurasian steppe. But somewhere out there in the wild, food is scarce, and people are starting to move. Meanwhile, harvests begin to decline in Anatolia. More food has to be traded for, reserves start getting depleted. Unrest begins. The underpinning of the social fabric of these societies starts to unravel. Priests and kings, the mainstays of the social order, had one job in the eyes of the people: to make sure that the gods granted a good harvest. And as harvests decline, people begin to talk, quietly at first, away from the centers of power, and then more openly. Maybe these princes and prelates in their palaces aren't what the gods want. Maybe they've even angered the gods. Then reports start coming in. Pirates in the Aegean Sea. New raiders, strange people who no one recognizes. Because of this, trade starts to decline. And then, one by one, the great palace centers of the Mycenaeans start to go dark. International trade begins to come apart. The Hittites panic. They move troops to Cyprus to secure their copper supply. Emergency smithies are set up, working day and night to produce weapons of war. Refugees from the Aegean start to turn up on Egyptian and Hittite shores. They bring tales of an unstoppable tide of barbaric sea people, burning everything on the coast. They talk of melting down their sacred objects to make weapons of war. Some refugees are embraced, but many have to be turned away. There's just no food. There's no time to integrate these foreign peoples into society. Some leave peacefully, others arm themselves. If there's no sanctuary, then there is only force. Then something happens. The evacuation order is given for Cyprus.
Walpole.
Smithies are abandoned. Weapons are buried. Plans are made to return and collect these weapon caches, but no one will ever return. Then the dark tide reaches the mainland. Sea people crash into the Bronze Age shore. Everywhere there's chaos. Minor kings send desperate letters back and forth asking for help, but there's no help to be had. Everyone's barely contending with their own disasters. And so the international diplomatic system that they had so long relied upon begins to break down. Meanwhile, the great chariot armies begin to fall apart too. They were designed for rich kingdoms facing each other in formal warfare. They were meant to be rolled out once or twice a year, but this is a battle of attrition. This is a continuous war, not the kind of neat, organized, singular battles that they're used to. The fighting doesn't stop. And so expensive machines and irreplaceably trained men are lost, and yet the Sea People's numbers seem endless. The great grain stores of the giant Bronze Age cities are burnt or pillaged. Famine spreads. Disease sweeps the land. People start to abandon the coastal cities. They retreat to the defensible points, to the mountains and the hills. Finally, international trade breaks down completely.
To me, it feels like this could have happened, but he's going into way too much detail to, I guess, tell this story. I mean, there's a high chance that all of this probably didn't happen. But yeah, it could be a chain of events, right? I mean, anything could have happened, like, trade becomes unstable, then also, oh, look at the raiders are there, all basically piles up into this kind of a crisis. It's like, domino effect, basically.
The complex supply chain that allowed for the production of arms and even for the farming tools of the Bronze Age is gone. Economic capacity nosedives, and even the ability to replace losses dwindles away. Central authority now begins to fall apart. Many kings and local rulers are already dead. Those who aren't have little claim to legitimacy. The armed men that they used to employ now see a better opportunity and join the chaos. Without the central authority to direct the command economies of the late Bronze Age, production finally grinds to a halt. Work becomes much more primitive and localized. Kingdoms no longer exist. Only small groups trying to find a way to get by. At last, there is nothing left to burn, nothing left to pillage, and so the Sea Peoples begin to dissipate. Egypt and Assyria were too robust to crumble completely, but with the rest of the world collapsing around them, even these peerless kingdoms are diminished and fall into a state of decline. Rebuilding this will take centuries. For us today, it would be easy to see this as a morality tale, a warning against complex societies and international trade, but I think that's too simplistic a view.
Yeah.
The Bronze Age societies were better for their complexity. Take that complexity away and you're just left with that same post-collapse.
Yeah, it's not about the system that was... but yeah, basically the system has its flaw, but system is also necessary. That's the thing about lots of modern things too. Democracy has many flaws, right? Free speech could go either way. So basically there is always pros and cons. Certain things as cons that is just seen as a flaw, but it's a con, but it also has a pro that we can't live without, let's just say. So this system basically that we have today, basically we rely on everybody else in trading. Basically lots of countries doesn't locally produce lots of things that they need, so they rely on trading. That is the current times. Maybe not at this type of a critical level, but everybody relies on trading. So obviously that was good, right? That trading like that, I guess internationally, basically made everybody rich, made everybody more productive, and it just grew. Because Mycenaean, those complexes, even the Greeks came around like, what the fuck? And everybody was stunned, right? Everybody was stunned, like how those structures and everything, how advanced that was. So obviously that is good, but it also means it has a certain type of flaw that, if exploited right enough, it could collapse. So you just have to have some kind of a fail-safe on place. This was the earlier, I guess, version of this type of trading. So of course nobody can foresee these issues, right? So of course it collapsed like that.
Collapse Dark Age. It's pretty hard to collapse further than that. Without that complexity, you don't have the high levels of production to maintain cities, to provide better tools to workers and better arm the military. Without that complexity, you can't support a population anywhere near the size these societies grew to. And as we see during the collapse, once you can't support that population, there's no nice way to bring that number down. People starve and die. Without that complexity, we don't have the social capacity for leisure required to produce art or support innovation. Without that complexity, we're all left scrabbling in the dirt or killing each other for our next meal. And it's easy to see these societies as nicely built houses of cards, where removing any one piece will cause them to come crashing down. But that's not quite accurate either. These kingdoms were actually more resilient to minor shocks than less complex societies would have been. A smaller, less organized group of people could be wiped out by just one bad harvest. But these kingdoms were nowhere near as vulnerable to such catastrophes. Because the kings and the priests managed and stockpiled the grain, there were always reserves if something went wrong in the short term. But these complex societies are more susceptible to major shocks. In preparing for this series, James read a number of books on how societies collapse, and there was one particular theory that resonated with him. It was the idea of systems collapse. This theory, in a very, very simplified form, is that societies add complexities to deal with problems. If you want better sanitation, you add a sewer system. But each solved problem usually comes with ongoing costs. Now you need people to run and maintain those fancy new sewer systems. So, as a society grows more and more complex, the ongoing cost for maintaining your society grows, and the cost for solving new problems increases. In a normal environment, this is totally fine. The loss of efficiency due to maintenance costs on previously solved problems is offset by the discovery of new efficiencies, better manufacturing techniques, beneficial foreign trade, new technologies. Solving problems often creates new efficiencies as well, and so the more complex the society, the larger the pool of resources it has to draw from. Thus, it can support solving ever more expensive problems. Unless it can't. The crux of the idea sort of lays out two ways that a society collapses. There's a slow collapse, where the cost of maintenance eventually exceeds the society's output, and yet going back, unsolving any of your problems, costs more than you can recoup. This is sort of what happened to Rome. To maintain their population, Rome expanded. But then, due in part to outside factors, the cost of garrisons for all of these places they'd expanded to essentially grew to exceed the value holding all of those places provided. But their society had grown to depend on so many of the resources from those places that simply giving them up would be even more costly than not doing so. And so, since the system couldn't be unwound or realigned, eventually it simply fell. But there's also another kind of collapse. When a series of major problems hit all at once, and a society is complex enough that the cost of dealing with them is very high, the society has no recourse. All of its systems are so interconnected that it can't sacrifice any one system to deal with problems in another. And as pieces start to fall out of the system, their very interconnectedness becomes a weakness, and society falls apart. So to me, the lesson...
Yeah, that is a great way of seeing things, I guess. Yeah, so basically, so if you go down a path, basically singular path, and you grew at a rate that you become, that big and that complex, but then you realize, okay, you've become way too complex than you can afford. But yeah, you can't go back to it, but now you can't do anything, so you're kind of stuck, which is kind of fucked up. It's a slow declining economy. It leads to bankruptcy, sure, but also a complex system. If lots of outside factors attack, right, at the same time, barbarians, some natural disaster, and then everything basically slowly attacks. I mean, the system that you created, you have to keep them to make sure your economy runs. You can't just stop one and not stop the entire thing. And the cost stays high. There is no, going to panic mode that you reserve money and stop lots of things. You can't do that anymore. So it's a very fucked up situation. I guess, only way to, I guess, mitigate that is to, have abundance of resource and manpower. So any system like this, if it exists, has to, I guess, in advance need to think that if we're going to be at this level of, I guess, spending and, I guess, complexity, we need even more manpower and resources than it requires. So when time does need, we can have the extra manpower and resources to deal with shit. If you're running, I guess, neck to neck, right? I guess just the right amount, there is a risk, massive risk there, I guess. But I feel like in our world right now, we are at that type of problem. We have resources and manpower just enough, or even a bit less than what we need for all this complex trading and all. That anything like one country attacking some other country with a nuclear weapon is enough to collapsing the whole world. I've said that in the first part or second part of this series, that we are walking in a thin thread. If that anything goes out of bound, and we get fucked. If somebody bombs London, we all are screwed. Because there is no abundance of resource and manpower. I mean, yeah, there is a manpower, but there is no abundance of resources right now. So, yeah.
Is not that we should make our societies less complex, or that we should give up everything we've achieved and go back to a more basic time. I mean, I would rather be a person of middling means today than a wealthy person even 200 years ago.
Yeah.
Rich folks still had to use chamber pots back then. You couldn't call someone far away. Getting an orange in the middle of winter was near impossible, and a simple infection could just end your life.
Seriously.
Rather, to me, the lesson
the boy has diarrhea. Goodbye. Say goodbye to your friends, family, your cousins. You're going down, I guess. You have diarrhea now.
Bronze Age collapse teaches is that even today, we are not invulnerable. With all of our technology and industry and military might, we stand on a fragile edifice. We can weather shocks today that would have destroyed earlier civilizations. Droughts, the appearance of some new disease, no problem, we can handle it. But we still have to be careful. We have to handle these incredible cultures we've built thoughtfully and with respect. For today, in this modern era where we can probably weather most any crisis, if we fool ourselves into believing that we're immune, we may go on to create so many crises of our own that we bring about the collapse of our own systems.
I just thought of it. Global warming is that thing. Remember he said that we can't go back. And, we don't have enough resources and things to, I guess, do something about the issue that is at the hand. Global warming is that. We can't stop all the gas, fossil fuel burning right now. The world would collapse. We can't stop that. But if we keep doing that, the world will, the earth will become, most of it unlivable. So we are trapped in that kind of situation, the way he was talking about. We are in that predicament right now. I mean, our system, we don't have enough resources and, resources and money to make certain greener things in masses around the world that would basically change all the energy production needs. We can't do that because we don't have the money and resources for that. We can't stop burning fossil fuels because if we do that, everything collapses. So we are stuck in that way with the global warming right now. That is the issue. All these scientists are basically warning us because of global warming that, what the fuck, we are coming at the point that it will be irreversible in just a few decades. And the way we are going about right now, we are nowhere near close to doing anything about it. It's literally like walking towards our death. It will be a slow death, but death nonetheless. Our planet will become unlivable eventually because of it. Maybe, hopefully, somebody will invent something that will do something about carbon footprint or whatever. Like, I guess with some kind of a mechanical engineering device or something. Let's hope. But right now, as far as doing something, we can't do anything because we don't have that resources. So we are at that verge. Right, people, that was the Bronze Age collapse, system collapse, accessory part 4 by and extra credits. If you like my next 4 subscribe, check out the next there's a link in the description, check out the cards, check out the end cards, and yeah, I'll see you next time.